a cracked heat shield, a known flaw. And NASA sent 4 astronauts around the moon anyway. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not speculation. This is what the official investigation found. And guys, when I read through this the first time, I had to stop. I had to go back. I read it again. Because what is buried inside these reports, what the headlines are not telling you, is frankly one of the most alarming stories in modern space history. So let's talk about it, all of it, right now. Because this is ongoing. This is not resolved. And the next mission, the one that is supposed to carry human beings to the moon and back, is already being planned on top of this unresolved problem. Let that sink in. We have over 50 years since Apollo. We have the most advanced space agency on the planet. And in September 2022, NASA launched the Artemis I mission, an uncrewed test flight, sending the Orion capsule around the moon and back. The whole world was watching. It was supposed to be a triumph, a declaration that humanity was going back to the moon. And it was, for a moment. But here is what they found when Orion splashed down in the Pacific on December 11th, 2022. The heat shield had degraded in a way that nobody expected, not a little, not within acceptable margins, in a way that stunned the engineers who had designed it. Chunks of the heat shield material, the ablative coating that is the only thing standing between the crew and temperatures of around 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, that is roughly 2,160 degrees Celsius, had burned away unevenly. Pieces had char-cracked and fallen off in a pattern that the models had not predicted. And here's the critical part, guys. Really listen to this. NASA knew about this before Artemis II. They knew before they strapped 4 astronauts into that same capsule. The Artemis II crew, Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen. 4 human beings. Assigned to fly around the moon inside a capsule with a heat shield that had already shown unexpected failure behavior on its very first deep space reentry. I have to say, when I understood the full picture here, I felt the pressure on my chest just thinking about it. So what exactly is the heat shield? And why does this matter so much? Right, let me explain this because this is the heart of the whole story. The Orion capsule uses what is called an ablative heat shield. The material is called AVCOAT. It's a honeycomb structure filled with a special compound that is designed to burn away in a controlled manner during reentry. As it burns, it absorbs and dissipates the enormous heat generated by the capsule slamming back into Earth's atmosphere at around 25,000 miles per hour. That's roughly 40,000 kilometers per hour, guys. Coming back from the moon, not from the International Space Station, from the moon. The re-entry velocity is significantly higher. The thermal load is significantly more extreme. This is not a routine situation, and the AVCOAT did not behave the way the simulation said it would. Engineers observed that sections of the heat shield had cracked and shed material in larger pieces and at different depths than the thermal models had predicted. The technical term is called anomalous char liberation. In plain language, the outer burned layer, instead of staying in place and doing its job, was breaking off in chunks. And underneath those chunks, the next layer was exposed to temperatures it was not supposed to face until much later in the re-entry sequence. Now, NASA is saying that there was always sufficient margin, that even with this unexpected behavior, the capsule and any crew inside would have survived. And I want to be fair here. I want to be precise. That is what the official position is. But here is where I have to ask the question that I think every single person watching this should be asking. If the behavior was within acceptable margins, why has it taken over 2 years of investigation to understand why it happened? Because that is the truth, guys. NASA's own Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel, they flagged this. They flagged it publicly. In 2024, they stated that the root cause of the heat shield anomaly had not yet been fully understood. That is a direct statement from NASA's own independent safety watchdog, not fully understood. And the Artemis II launch, currently targeted for 2025, is being planned with a crew of 4 human beings inside that same design. Now, let me give you the very latest on where this investigation stands, because this is where it gets even more interesting. Further in this video, I will explain what they have actually found inside the material and why it changes everything about how we should think about this. But first, I want you to understand the scale of what we are talking about here. Artemis, I traveled approximately 1.4 million miles. That is around 2.25 million kilometers, round trip. The re-entry was the most demanding ever attempted by a crewed-class capsule in the modern era. The capsule hit the atmosphere at a skip re-entry profile, meaning it actually bounced off the upper atmosphere once before coming in for the final descent. This was intentional. It was designed to bleed off speed and reduce the peak heating load. But it also meant the heat shield experienced two separate heating events. Not one, two. And in both events, the avcoat behaved unexpectedly. Now here is what the deeper analysis has started to reveal. And guys, this is where the real story is. Engineers and independent analysts, when they went through the post-flight data, identified that the issue may be connected to trapped gas pockets inside the avcoat material. When the surface heats up, these gas pockets expand, and when they expand faster than the material can vent them, the outer char layer cracks and releases. Think of it like this. You put a thick piece of bread in a very hot oven. The outside chars fast, but the moisture trapped inside is turning to steam. If it can't escape slowly, it forces its way out. It pops the outer layer, it breaks the crust. That is essentially what may be happening to the Orion heat shield at the microscopic structural level during re-entry. The material itself, the avcoat compound, was reformulated for Artemis. The original avcoat used on the Apollo capsules was a slightly different formulation. The manufacturing process changed, and there are serious questions now about whether the new manufacturing process introduced these microscale inconsistencies in the material density that are driving this anomalous behavior. I did a little research, and I want to tell you what I found in the record here because it is important. The Apollo program used block avcoat poured in individual cells. Artemis uses a large monolithic single block avcoat construction. This was actually considered an engineering advancement, a simpler design, fewer seams, fewer joints. But the thermal testing that was done on this new monolithic construction, the analysis now suggests, may not have fully captured how the material would perform under the actual combined conditions of deep space re-entry velocity, this specific skip trajectory profile, and the particular thermal gradients that you get when the capsule hits the atmosphere at moon return speed. The simulations had gaps, and the real world exposed those gaps on the very first flight. Now, NASA is not sitting still. I want to make that clear. They have been working on this. They have conducted additional thermal testing. They have analyzed the Artemis I heat shield material in destructive testing on recovered sections. They have made some modifications to the Artemis II heat shield, and they are implementing additional instrumentation so that if anomalous behavior occurs again on Artemis II, they will have better real-time data. But here is the uncomfortable question that the NASA Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel raised. That independent watchdog raised it directly in their public reports. Have the modifications actually addressed the root cause, or are they managing the symptoms of a problem they do not yet fully understand? Because there is a difference, a significant difference. If you know exactly why the material is shedding, you can fix it. You can requalify the material. You can say with engineering confidence that the problem is solved. But if you are still working on understanding the mechanism, if the root cause is not fully characterized, then you are flying on confidence and margin, not on certainty. And these are not anonymous critics saying this. This is NASA's own safety panel, in their own words, in their own public reports. Would you feel comfortable sitting in that capsule? I mean, really think about it. You are Reed Wiseman. You are Christina Koch. You are strapping in. You are lifting off on the most powerful rocket ever launched, the Space Launch System, generating 8.8 million pounds of thrust. You are heading to the moon. And the only thing that will bring you home alive is a heat shield that showed behavior on its test flight that the engineers are still fully characterizing. I have to say, these are brave, brave people. And the reason this matters beyond the 4 astronauts on Artemis II, the reason this is a story that affects the entire future of human space exploration is this. Artemis III, the landing mission. The mission that is supposed to put human beings on the surface of the moon for the first time since December 1972. That mission depends entirely on the Orion capsule performing flawlessly, including that heat shield, on a re-entry that will be at least as demanding as Artemis I. And beyond that, the architecture for crewed missions to Mars, NASA's long-term roadmap, it runs through Orion. It runs through this capsule. The heat shield problem is not a small technical footnote. It sits right at the center of NASA's entire crewed deep space exploration program. So here's the broader picture that I want you to understand, because this is not random. Space agencies around the world are under enormous political pressure right now. NASA's budget has faced serious scrutiny. The Artemis program has already experienced years of delays and billions of dollars in cost overruns. The Space Launch System alone has cost taxpayers over $23 billion in development. There is intense pressure to fly, to show progress, to justify the investment. And when there is that kind of pressure, when the stakes are that high politically and financially, the risk is that schedule pressure can historically distort safety decision-making. We have seen this before. The Space Shuttle Challenger, January 28, 1986, engineers at Morton Thiokol raised concerns about O-ring performance in cold temperatures the night before launch. The launch proceeded. 73 seconds after liftoff, Challenger broke apart. The Columbia disaster in 2003. Foam debris struck the leading edge of the orbiter's wing during launch. The damage was known. The risk was assessed as acceptable. Columbia broke apart during re-entry. All 7 crew members were lost. I am not saying Artemis II will end in disaster. I want to be very clear about that. I am not saying that. What I am saying is that the pattern of flying with known unresolved anomalies under schedule pressure, that pattern has a history. And it is a history that everyone involved in human spaceflight should carry with them every single day. The NASA Safety Panel carries it. That is why they keep raising this issue publicly. That is why they keep putting it in their reports. Because their job is to remember that history. So what happens next? What should we be watching? First, the heat shield qualification testing that NASA is conducting needs to produce a clear root cause determination. Not just a "we believe the margins are sufficient" statement, an actual mechanistic understanding of why the anomaly occurred. Second, the modifications made to the Artemis II heat shield need to be validated against that root cause, not just tested in a general thermal sense, specifically validated against the identified failure mechanism. Third, and this is what I would watch most closely, the Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel's next public report. They meet quarterly. They are independent. They have access to the full technical data, and they have already shown they are willing to say publicly what the program might prefer to keep quiet. Watch that report. Fourth, watch the launch date. If Artemis II continues to slip, if there are further delays beyond the current 2025 target, that may signal that the engineering confidence is not yet where it needs to be. Delays in programs like this are often the system working correctly. The pressure relief valve opening before something worse happens. Because here's the thing about deep space that is different from everything else. There is no rescue mission. If something goes wrong with Orion on the way to the moon or on the way back, there is no space shuttle on the pad waiting to go get them. There is no ISS to evacuate to. There is no timeline for a rescue vehicle. The crew of Artemis II, if they run into serious trouble beyond Earth orbit, are on their own. That is the reality of what these 4 people have signed up for. And that is why the heat shield has to be right. Not probably right. Not right within margins that were established before we understood the full failure behavior, right? So when you hear NASA say the Artemis II crew is safe, when you hear officials talk about confidence in the system, hold on to what you now know. The independent safety watchdog said the root cause was not fully understood. The material showed behavior that the models did not predict. Modifications have been made, but the full picture is still being assembled. This is not what they are putting in the press releases. This is what is in the technical reports. And now you know it too. Guys, this is exactly the kind of story that I feel the pressure on my chest talking about. Because this is not abstract. These are real human beings. And the decisions being made right now in engineering review rooms, in NASA headquarters, in budget meetings in Washington, those decisions will determine whether Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen come home. I hope they do. I genuinely hope every piece of this works perfectly. But hope is not an engineering standard. And that is what we really have to say. Stay safe, guys. Be aware. Bye-bye.